Good evening and happy Sabbath, everyone. Today I've been asked to speak on my mission trip to Uganda. As many of you may know, I was in Uganda from the end of May till the beginning of September, so about 3 months. And this was my second trip to Uganda, volunteering in the Christalis orphanage that's there. It has about 30 kids living in the home, along with 4 babies. So my story starts with my first week there. And as we can see in some of the pictures here, these are pictures from the local market where we would receive our produce and our vegetables and our chicken, our goat, everything that we were going to eat within the house. So there are some pictures of that. And in my first week, it was a Thursday, I went to the market with the cook. And we were carrying all these heavy bags for this home of so many. And as we were going through, I still remember we were at the booth for these little tiny silver river fish. I don't know if you know what that is. I know in Mizo culture, they take these fish, they fry it, and they put it with chili, and they make it somewhat like a pickle. So we were standing at that booth, and I was so amazed that we could see that fish. And right at that moment, we heard a boom. As I was rushing towards the ground, I felt this sweep across me. And as I slowly got the courage to look up, I noticed the whole market was down. We were all ducking for cover because outside of the market square, soldiers had detonated a bomb. This was often practiced, not the bomb, but often practiced to scare the people into helping them remember who's in charge. So slowly, as we began to rise, and it's like a movie, it was surreal. As we started to get up, I saw some people rushing right past me to leave, and some people were packing up their vending items, and the cook I was with said, "Okay, we need garlic, onions, and bananas." And I didn't even have words. I was shocked. It was as if nothing happened. So we got the half pound of silverfish. We got the 2 purchases that we had left along with the bananas, which are huge. They come off the branch. We had to get somebody to carry it for us, and they were willing to do that. And when we got home, the staff were asking me, "Oh, we heard what happened. Are you okay?" And I barely said yes. I was fine. Nothing was wrong, but the words were barely coming out of my mouth. And once I finally said, "Yeah, like everybody's okay, we're okay," they laughed. They felt as if I was bad luck. I had brought something, because every time I seemed to be there, I always had some freak accidents. All of my buses would break down. Motorcycles that we use for travel would run out of fuel, and now this bomb, which never happened before. So they said that they were used to this. They were used to the government doing things like this, and this was just another day for them. And it wasn't like that for me. It took me a solid week of just staying inside the house, refusing to go back into town. But eventually, I gathered the courage to go back out because this is where I was, and this is the life they live every day. This is the life the children live, this is the life the staff live, and this is life. So that was an awakening to me on where I was. And as I continued on, this trip took everything out of me. It was so stressful, I cannot even describe it. It was absolutely the most stress I have ever endured, probably in my entire life, packed into 3 months. One of the events that stands out in my memory is I was working in the home, and for the first time in my life, I had to become a real parental figure. I've babysat, I've led VBS, I have younger siblings, and none of that prepared me at all for this, because I wanted the kids to like me. I really wanted them to like me. But at the same time, I had to be the one to reprimand them. So that meant giving them the talks, giving them the lectures, punishing them, and hoping that they realize it. So that often meant getting the silent treatment. That often meant they didn't talk to me for a while, or they were just annoyed with me. And that was something I had to learn to cope with and to deal with. But in the home, there are 2 children who are HIV positive. One is a boy and one is a girl, and they're about the same age. They're about 13. So in my time there, the boy was having a lot of issues. He had these mood swings, and we were all aware of it, and all the staff kind of assumed that it was part of his medication, that a lot of these kids have a lot of mood swings. But particularly one night, it got so bad that we found him in the corner of his room with blades, saying that he was going to kill himself. And I had no idea what to do. And they all looked at me. What do we do? And I didn't know. So the dad of the home said the first thing we can do is go through that entire side of the house, and we removed all sharp objects, ropes, pens, pencils, anything at all. And we decided that we would just stay up with him for the rest of the night. We had no choice. And I remember I stood outside the kitchen and I just paced back and forth for almost 1 hour, not sure what to do. It wasn't my shift to stay awake yet, but I couldn't possibly sleep. And I remember I prayed, and I barely could even say a prayer. I was just saying, please tell me what to do. Give me the wisdom to know, because I had no idea. This lasted for about 3 days, and we had taken him to the HIV clinic, where the counselor had said that a lot of kids who suffer from HIV often have these episodes and mood swings as a result from their condition, along with the society and the stigma that they receive from being HIV positive. And he was diagnosed with bipolar depression and was given medication. But these kids already take so much medication. So adding on to it was a battle in itself. I sat with him for at least 45 minutes every morning and every night, begging him, making deals with him to try and take the medication. And throughout the day, I just sat with him continuously, just had to be with him at all times, and often that meant sitting in silence. And on the 3rd night, I remember he asked me to come outside after all the kids were asleep, and he apologized for his behavior and what had happened. And I didn't know what to say. He was coming out of this episode, and he was crying, and he asked me, what's wrong with me? I can't control it. And I didn't know what to say. Again, at a loss for words, but I just told him, we love you so much. We're trying so hard. Don't push us away. We're the ones trying to help you. But that's what he's always hearing. So he just said, can I be with you during the day? So that's fine. So for the rest of the trip, I would just check in with him. We would do little activities. If he ever wanted to talk, we would go to the front of the house and sit out, and we would talk. And it's hard for the people there to understand the effects of depression when most of them are depressed in themselves. They're living with the turmoil of no one has money, they barely have family, and it's just this turmoil. So the cook, Joshua, he actually told me about his story, and that his parents had died when he was very young, and he only had older sisters. So his older sisters tried to take care of him, but they didn't really know what they were doing either, and they didn't have money to spare. But he wanted to go to school. So as a 6 and 7-year-old, he would go into town and find an odd job, and he would work for about 3,000 shillings for his tuition. 3,000 shillings. So $1 is about 3,600 shillings. This is less than $1 for his semester term for him to attend school. So he himself, a young boy, would go into town to get the money for his education. And then he would go to class, and he wouldn't have books, he wouldn't have a uniform, so he would get chased out of school, but he would always go back. And he said he continued doing this until he was able to join Christalis so that he could get a proper education and continue. So it's difficult when everyone is suffering. Another young boy, he was new to the home. He'd only been there about a year, and he is 13 years old. He's very, very cute. His name is Ben, and one day while we were going on a walk, he told me about how his family had abandoned him. So they had sent him to school, and when he came home, it was empty. They had all left. He had sisters, he had a mom, he had a dad, and they left him. So he began going into town and working with an older man who was laying bricks. So this little boy, who comes up to about here on me, was laying bricks from the age of 11 to sustain himself, and he would get a few shillings and he would go and buy some food, sit in his home until dark, and when the sun set, he would just go to sleep, wake up in the next morning, and go to work. And when you talk about school with them, it's so crazy to me because I was always willing to be sick. I was always willing to skip class or be sick for a day, and these kids are longing to go to school. They're begging for it. And it was just a reality check to see where our priorities lie and how blessed we are. One of my absolute favorites is a boy named Joseph. And Joseph was 12 years old when I first went to Uganda last year, and he could barely speak English. He had only attended nursery class at the age of 4 and P1, which is approximately first grade. And after that, both of his parents had passed away. His dad was an immigrant from Kenya who married a woman from Uganda. They got married. They had one son, which is rare to have one child, and they both passed away. So from the age of 5, he lived on the streets, providing for himself. And this was something I learned. He was the boy who knew all of the street kids because he had lived on the street the longest. So the first time I had gone there, we went into town, and that's the trash pile that they would eat out of. And he showed me this big tree, and he said all the street kids go there and hide and sleep within the tree and under the tree at night. And together, that kind of provides a protection for them by staying together. And I couldn't believe it. This sweet little boy who's now learning English and going to school and cries when someone takes his toy car, what he had gone through. And before was a picture of what the houses look like. It's just like a concrete building. But we grew closer on that trip, and leaving him was one of the absolute hardest goodbyes for me. And we said it with the few English words that we both shared. But this time when I returned, he was no longer a boy. A year and a half had completely changed him. He was the one carrying my suitcases. He was showing me how to pick beans from the garden, which was something I learned. I had no idea that beans grow on top of the ground. Did not know that. So he was the one, which also they thought was pathetic that I didn't know what that was, but I didn't know that. So he was one to show me that you find the vine, you pull on the vine, you stick it in a pile, we beat the pile later, beans come out. No clue, didn't know that. Also corn, fetching corn from the garden to put the stalk down and to get the good ones. I learned a lot. And he was the one to kind of take me through everything, and he noticed that I always liked fruit, and the fruit there is amazing. I absolutely love it. I think it's just so sweet and juicy, and he started collecting his fruit that he would get from lunch or from supper on the weekends, especially passion fruits, because he knew those were my favorite, and he would give them to me. And one day somebody brought a very unripe papaya, and I ate the whole thing. I was so excited to get papaya, and he didn't know that was my favorite. So we had many papaya trees around the house campus, so he started watching all of them to see when they would become ready. And once they were ready, he would climb up the tree, pick it down for me, and hide it from everyone and give it to me secretly, this whole big papaya. I thought that was so sweet. But when I think about what he had gone through, living on the street, it was so strange that when I talked about something in town, a lot of the younger kids didn't know that place in town, but for him, he knew it as, oh, that's next to the trash pile we eat from, or that's across the street from this other place where this man would let us work. And it was just the priorities were so different. Our electricity in the home came from solar power, so it depended on how much sun we got during the day. And the water was either brought in a government truck that we bought water from, or we went to the river to collect water in buckets. And it was just completely different. My priorities shifted, and it was just such a life-changing time for me. When I was preparing to leave, I was giving away all my things, and I had brought 3 suitcases, so slowly as my supplies were finishing up, I would give the bag out to somebody because they use it as like a dresser. That's what they use it as, to like keep their belongings safe from rats and bugs, essentially. So on my last day, I noticed that one of the staff members had very few clothes. She wore the same 2 or 3 clothes in rotation. So I called her to my room. I gave her a few of my clothes, like a small stack of them, along with the biggest suitcase I had. And she immediately fell and just cried. And she said it was the nicest thing anyone had ever given her. And it was just something I was done with. It was just some clothes. It was nothing compared to all the things I have at home. And she was my age mate. She was 20. She had no family. And there she was, crying at my feet for something that I was just willing to be done with. I was just going to give it away. From the different things that happened while I was there, I fell off a motorcycle once. I was stranded on the side of the road multiple times. It became normal for me. From dealing with the kids to dealing with the many, many rats that were all over the home all the time, which was very new for me. And from the leopard that was outside of our house for 3 days. There was a leopard outside the house for 3 days. By that point, I was almost gone. I was almost excited. It was something new. So at night, we just heard this big, like a roar, but like a meow at the same time. And we all just ran inside, locked the doors, locked all the kids inside, and just slept. That was it. We were like, don't move. I kept thinking it'll eat the goats before it eats me. And that was it. We just tried not to move and just go to sleep and ignore it. But from the stress to just everything, all in all, it was absolutely something I will never forget. And if somebody had told me a year ago that that's what I would endure while I was there, I honestly don't think I would have had the strength to go through with it. But David Livingstone says, sympathy is no substitute for action. And for me, helping these kids was something my heart yearns for. And for so long, it was so easy to just, somebody else is doing it. It's okay. But being there and seeing the impact that it made on those kids and on me. But again, if somebody had told me that's what I would have had to deal with, I don't think I would have had the strength to do it. But that's what's so amazing about our God, is that even when you think you don't have the strength, you don't have the capability, you don't have the tools, you don't have the words, He provides all of that for you. So the verse that was read today is a verse that the kids say every morning and every night for the year of 2018. It's 1 Peter 4, verse 1 through 2, and they say, God's will. Since Jesus went through everything you are going through and more, learn to think like Him. Think of your suffering as a weaning from that old sinful habit of always expecting to get your own way. Then you'll be able, oh my goodness, I forgot it. Free to pursue what God wants, then you'll be able to pursue what God wants instead of being tyrannized by what you want. So when you think that this is what you're supposed to do, it's often not. God has a plan for you, and I hope that we all find the strength, the words, and the opportunity to follow what God's will is for each of us. Thank you.